Hello. Thanks for joining in. I'm sorry that earlier I lost internet connection and the screen froze. And apparently, quite a few people were waiting around for a while for it to restart. But my whole computer was frozen and I tried a few things. I should have tried a forced restart. Anyway, I was unsuccessful at that point in time, but I'm back again now and apologetic to anybody whose time I wasted. But let's move on. If there's anyone still awake and wanting to talk about corruption, thanks for tuning in, and thank you to anybody who views this later on. Let's have a look. I'm reading an article called Trump's Legal Team Gave Thousands in Contributions to Republican Senators Ahead of Impeachment Trial. Well. Not only Republican senators, but also donations to the lawyers. And of course, we know that Trump's lawyer, Jay Sekulow, received over $65 million from various charities that somehow diverted $60 million worth of funds to various members of Jay Sekulow's family. That guy is good at ripping off charities and good at exploiting his professed Christian faith for personal financial gain. All right. So the Center for Responsive Politics, CFPR, has noted that Ken Starr and Robert Ray donated thousands of dollars to Mitch McConnell before joining the president's team. So what, they wanted to pay for the favor of being a celebrity lawyer for the most criminal shit show of a defense case that America has ever publicly witnessed. Interesting. Yes, Mitch McConnell did brag to Fox News host Sean Hannity that he would be in total coordination with the White House offices, with the White House counsel's office, and the people who are representing the president in the well of the Senate. So that alarmed a lot of people. I'm really hoping that independent voters were listening to that. Admission by Mitch McConnell that he had no intention of being loyal to his oath of doing impartial justice, or helping to deliver impartial justice. Mitch McConnell openly admitted that he would not be an impartial juror and that he would be coordinating with President Trump. That just shows Americans how far America has left democracy behind and left the checks and balances of a functional democracy behind. I'm not going to call democracy dead. I'm not going to pronounce democracy as being without potential for resurrection. There's still multiple avenues for trying to protect election security. There's multiple avenues still for campaigning for a candidate who's not incredibly corrupt. Now, something that gives me hope, even though this might not give other people hope, is that Trump even felt the need to try and malign Joe Biden, that Trump felt the need to try and corruptly and criminally solicit foreign interference in America's election. That's great. It means he didn't feel like he had the whole thing sewn up through corrupt voting systems and hackable electronic voting machines. So that gave me hope that for him it's still important to try and gain an advantage over his Democratic candidates. That gives me hope that the Democratic candidates have a chance. And yes, I think a Biden-Harris combination would have a very good shot to defeat Trump. Not Bernie. And I think I saved something. Oh, I know what I did with it. I retweeted a bit earlier, and we can listen to it. What I'll need to do is, first of all, close this box, and we can add audio of Bernie Sanders in an interview where the interviewer is great. They're not particularly deferential to Bernie, but they are Okay, now we go share screen and we click share audio so that you can hear Bernie being questioned about why he didn't go public with the discoveries from his campaign staff members that Russian accounts were boosting his campaign. So he objects to the word promoting his campaign, but that's what they were doing. That's what Mueller's $40 million report helped find, that Russian intelligence officers were paid money, had $1 million a month budget to boost Trump and also boost Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein to create dissent. Bernie is a spoiler candidate from Putin's perspective. From his own perspective, I'm sure he's the only answer to America's problems. But yes, well, let's have a listen. I can put my headphones on so I can listen as well. Let's hear what Bernie has to say. All right.
Senator Sanders said this Sunday on TV that his campaign and he were aware that Russian bots were promoting his campaign versus Mrs. Clinton. He's also said that he was aware WikiLeaks was publishing emails stolen from the DNC by Russians. Why did he not once warn his supporters about this? Before the election in November 2016, his supporters obsessed about WikiLeaks, and many decided not to vote for Clinton because of it or to stay home. If he was aware that Russians were trying to promote him and divide Democrats against Mrs. Clinton, why did he not communicate this to his supporters?
Well, as I've just indicated, in September, actually, a guy from our campaign did go to the Clinton campaign.
But Mika wants to know why you didn't take that to your supporters, take that public.
Well, we knew what we didn't know. I didn't in September. Somebody in the midst of all of this, I was out campaigning very hard for Hillary Clinton. So I don't, let me leave it at that.
Why leave it at that? Why not? Because I mean, it was a specific question about why didn't you go to your supporters? So I'm curious.
No, because we did not know early on.
In September,
okay.
Why not?
What she said, what was her point?
So if you knew that Russian bots were promoting your campaign versus
I did
Mrs.
not
Clinton,
know that Russian bots were promoting my campaiin. Russian bots were not promoting my campaign.
Let's leave that.
What we found out is that in April and May, it appeared that there were lots of strange things happening attacking Hillary Clinton.
So let's take support out of it, because I think support is a charged word. But if you and your campaign knew that there was Russian meddling and that it was trying to sow divisions, why not take that directly to your supporters, many of whom really, hung on your every word, as you know.
Well, I would say that the real question to be asked is, what was the Clinton campaign? They had more information about this than we did. And at this point, we were working with them. So I think the proper question is...
So did the Clinton campaign say, don't talk about this?
No, of course not. But who do you think would be raising that issue?
Well, I could see a world in which Mrs. Clinton said, it's the Russians, and people and Sanders supporters say, oh, that's baloney. But if Sanders says it, they say, okay.
We knew what we knew when we knew it, and that's about all that I can say.
We knew what we knew when we knew it. What a great answer, Bernie Sanders. We knew what we knew when we knew it. That's why we didn't go public and tell Bernie Sanders supporters, it's true, Russians are attacking Hillary Clinton. They let her stand on a world stage by herself, pointing out that Russians were attacking her campaign, and didn't provide any support, so that his supporters could still keep on hating her, discounting that truth that she was being attacked, that her election was being unfairly affected by foreign interference. He left her there to look less than supported, while his followers continued to dismiss any claims of Russian interference, and they continue to do so. You'll see lots of Bernie Sanders supporters continue to say, oh yes, the Russian thing, a hoax, didn't happen, because they think it's just an excuse and people are making it up in order to detract from Bernie's real victory over Hillary Clinton that the DNC cheated him of when they rigged that election against wonderfully successful Bernie Sanders. I've heard so many decent people who I think are decent men on the left behave ridiculously in relation to Hillary Clinton. Are you aware that American politics are fake? Well, the elements of American politics that are known to have been faked are Trump's campaign that has been pumped up by Russian intelligence officials and Russian created algorithms, as well as Michael Cohen confessing to taking money from Donald Trump to buy off online polls in the initial stages of the Republican primary campaign so that he could rig those polls and make it look like Donald Trump had in fact been more successful than he had been. So yes, a great deal of Trump support is fake, but nevertheless, life imitates art. So you falsely exaggerate somebody's popularity, and then you create real popularity on the back of that. People copying and agreeing with what they think are real people and real expressions of support. And those support, that initial support has been faked. It's like growing some lab-created yeast to be a bread starter. You don't get the points for real bread when you have corrupted the process initially. Wow, I've just got this Bernie eye staring at me, so I'll close that. Done. All right. So yes, Bernie Sanders is a great spoiler candidate, as is Tulsi Gabbard, and they may very well choose to team up for the election. Tulsi has a lot of right-wing support because she's quite anti-migrant and has previously said a lot of anti-homosexual things. So her bigoted background, as well as her way of sanctifying bigotry by stamping her own beautiful, attractive face on top of it, brings a lot of disaffected men on board. Yes, both Sanders and Andrew Yang have candidates that say they won't vote for another nominee if their own nominee is successful. So quite a high percentage, I think 43% of Andrew Yang supporters claim that they won't vote for another candidate. All right, let's see if I can find that picture for you all. Mm-hmm. No, I don't have it at present, but I do have something that you might enjoy. Franklin Delano Roosevelt quote about Social Security, because that's a key point for us to emphasize at this point in our lives. We're trying to help build consensus around the need to oppose Trump. Something very important is Trump's attacks on Social Security. So let's rehabilitate the image of Social Security in the first place. When it was started, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "We can never insure 100% of the population against 100% of the hazards and vicissitudes of life. But we have tried to frame a law which will give some measure of protection to the average citizen and to their family against the loss of a job and against poverty-ridden old age." So that's really interesting. Oral's asking a question of, what do we think of Mitt Romney being snubbed by the Republican Party and denied an invitation to CPAC, the conservative conferencey thing? Yes, of course, Romney is being punished for breaking ranks and inviting public acquaintance with some of the facts around Trump's corruption, because Trump's corruption is the Republican Party corruption. Michael Gershon, a conservative columnist writing for the Washington Post, said tolerance of corruption is, after all, a form of corruption. So yes, we need to remember that the Republican Party are essentially highly enmeshed in the criminal enterprise that is Trump's version of government. It's important to note that fascism is something that doesn't work for the people. Fascism is a system of government that works to elevate the power of aggressive people. Fascism often arises in response to people's grievances and fears. When they think power is too tolerant, too moderate, they need somebody aggressive in power, and they vote for the candidate who most effectively harnesses that fear, who tells them, be afraid of all these various enemies, and I single-handedly will cultishly solve all of these problems for you. So people whose fears have graduated to an irrational level will believe fake promises about how to resolve those fears. So fascism has to govern at an emotional level for the people who have bought the fascist snake oil, which means instead of using normal altruism, which is when people benefit by feeling good when they work to help others, you instead have power maintenance instead of altruism. So people who gravitate towards politics because they want to enhance their own power and prestige and have no intention of helping people. So the people who succeed in gaining more power based on their ability to convincingly lie to people about how great they are will just ramp up not how much they serve the people, they'll ramp up how frightened and how gleefully cruel their base can feel. So they'll help their base buy into a sense of shared omnipotence, their superpower is the ability to ignore human considerations or humane considerations, the ability to care for others, the ability to take into account not hurting people for no good reason, for not being cruel to the vulnerable, such as children, etc. So Trump offers people the gleefulness of cruelty. It's why his Sean Hannity interview is still giving more food to whet the appetite of his base for cruelty. He's not capable of doing sophisticated analysis, but that's okay. That's not what his base wants. Trump was interviewed by Hannity, and he listed the Democratic candidates and just said rude things about all of them. Very playground level, rude things about Michael Bloomberg's height, calling Pocahontas dishonest, things which sound like they're from the new Trumpian era of politics, so they might not surprise people so much anymore. Because, of course, Trump calls people liars so much as a strategy for getting away with being an incredible liar himself. He utilizes that famous fascist technique of calling the press liars. All totalitarian people do this. They remove any mechanism for holding themselves accountable, so that they can instead use emotional mechanisms of propaganda media to whip up. Schadenfreude is the word for shameful glee. Can anybody find out, is there another German word that just means gleeful cruelty? The actual joy that people get from being able to exercise a power that decent people would not lower themselves to exercise. The decent people would see as being a betrayal of values and standards and everything that keeps civilization together. These people are gleefully unraveling the cardigan of society. So that's my lyrical explanation of fascism, something that just needs to pander to people's very superficial understanding of how the world works, their most superficial and their most cruel understanding of how the world works. Yes, it might be born of fear, but it's the type of, I mean, if we take racism as being irrational fear of an opposing group, I mean, fear of Germans in World War II wasn't irrational. Germany was attacking the world. Whereas racism is to pick a arbitrarily designated ethnic subgroup and say they are all attacking us when there is no actual cause. So the right often say, look at the left, they're being racist, they're betraying their own values. if we're ever critical of anything, but they're misrepresenting the true opposition to racism. Racism is saying judge individuals on their own merits, but it doesn't mean we can't judge collectively speaking when there are international conflicts on. I mean, everybody likes the story of a soccer game in the middle of World War I, when both English forces and German forces emerged from their trenches for a brief ceasefire at Christmas time, and they played a game of soccer with each other as well and treated each other as human beings. War is always a failure of a failure of diplomacy, because wars and conflicts of interest should be sorted out by seeking to make concessions, etc., negotiation. But some enemies are so lost to decency that they will not ever negotiate in good faith, and it's very difficult to keep them in line and to constrain their abuse of power without attacking them. That's a fair conclusion. It's not a, what's it called when you just love peace at all costs? Pacifist. It's not a pacifist conclusion to say war is necessary to protect yourselves when your foe has become irrationally aggressive and is building an empire on the basis of their ability to launch unjustified attacks and sell those unjustified attacks to people of their nation as justified. We notice that that's our explanation for not being pacifists, but at the same time, that's an explanation that the right are presumably perverting amongst themselves to say, no, war is necessary now. We need to wage war against migrants. And somebody's found the German word. Oh, how fantastic. I now need to figure out how to pronounce that. Fröhlichkeit. Fröhlichkeit. Happy cruelty. And I need to add to it because I want to say empowered cruelty. Empowered cruelty to say we don't feel bound by the constraints that civilized people typically feel constrained by. The happiness of declaring war, of saying, finally, we have determined that all of you people on the left are enemies. Multicultural society is our enemy. All of that sentiment, dog whistled sometimes by leaders capitalizing on the basest instincts of people in the population. There's always at least 20 to 30% of a population that have that capacity to be whipped up into an irrational, hateful, empoweredly cruel frenzy. They'll believe lies about demographic subgroups. They'll say, yes, Jews are responsible for all the ills of the world, or Jews are killing Christian children and using their blood to make bread. There's always been an appetite for irrational myth that unleashes cruelty. Humans have an appetite for cruelty. Freud called it the death wish, just that, glee in destroying things. Things aren't fair, so we'll pull everything down. You might have seen your children exhibit that if you've got more than one and they're competing with each other and they say, yep, I'm happy to not get anything as long as she doesn't get anything. Destroy everything because my id is raging. And what are some good uses that we can put that interest in justice? We can apply that interest in justice to. Let me check the time. Okay. People might have heard me before tell a story of seeing an experiment with psychologists and two monkeys in two adjacent cages. One monkey being fed cucumber and cheerfully eating that cucumber, the adjacent monkey being fed grapes. And when the cucumber-fed monkey notices the grapes, he is no longer content with the cucumber, and he throws the cucumber down out of the cage and leaps up onto the bars of the cage and shakes them and screams, loud monkey enraged screams, which showed me there's clearly an evolved instinct to resent injustice. So you're happy with your cucumber until you can see somebody being given sugar. Oh, so why would animals need that sense of justice? Why do we care so much when things aren't fair? How has Fox News been able to exploit that instinct by pretending to white people that everything that Black people have been given as tiny, pathetic attempts to redress injustice have been viewed as being things taken from white people? Only racist Fox viewers buy that explanation. Everybody else has been proud of affirmative action, proud of increasing rates of college education on the part of Black communities, that they have been at least given some access to opportunities that were previously closed to them, that some unjustly closed doors have been forcibly opened, that integration happened, that desegregation happened, against all of the verklicht, happily cruel instincts and inertia of Americans to put up with segregated societies, with perpetual humiliation and degradation of people purely for being Black, purely for being of African origin, and with enslaved ancestors, etc. Yes. So we know that Fox News feeds people who have an appetite for it, but it also cultivates and further extends that appetite for racist disinformation. Has anybody been able to think of any use, any evolutionary adaptive use that such a devoted interest in justice and fairness and parity would serve? What can we achieve as a community when we care about justice? I guess it can be a function of caring about each other. Oh, I have something you have less than me. I'll share with you. It's an instinct that has helped us unite as communities and therefore has strengthened us as survival as communities of hairless apes. If you leave us out in the cold, we die pretty quickly. We need to work together to build shelter, to form clothing for ourselves, and to hunt collectively to get food. All right, there we go. I figured it out for myself. Caring about other people means joining our fate together so that long-term fact that we die if left to our own devices for too long can be brought forward so that we actively feel good when we help others and other people have something equivalent to us that we want to share. So that monkey was not just going, why don't I have grapes? That monkey was going, why aren't the sugary, delicious grapes being shared? Because that monkey had evolved neural circuitry set up to be happy when things are shared and angry when things are not shared. So we all have a mixture in our societies of capitalism and socialism. We have some private enterprise and some public enterprise. In America, the pendulum of power has swung far away from some elements of socialism, but some elements are still there. But Americans have been taught to fear socialism, some of them, and some of them have gone so far to the left as a reactive mechanism to the right, to this the spread of right-wing sentiments and right-wing outcomes, that they've gone full happy clapper communist, and they say things like death to capitalism. And they're reinforced in that because capitalism is carrying with it this very potent, communicable disease at the moment. I've never used disease as a framework before for talking about greenhouse gas emissions, but it's kind of a disease because it's a little bit contagious. Everybody who gets access to the convenience of industrialization starts using it. The only downside is when we stick to those old familiar energy sources that have brought us wealth and success and convenience in many ways, we also start to heat up, and we also start to heat outside of our comfort zone. And the rate of heart failure goes up in countries on the equator. Middle Eastern laborers in the Middle East are dying at higher rates of heart disease because the temperatures have increased. And that temperature increase is merely an indication of the exponentially larger temperature increases that are soon to come the more we let coal-captured governments get away with using billions upon billions of dollars of public money to prop up and subsidize fossil fuel industries, even when they're increasingly unpopular with the public, as the public increasingly wises up to the threat to our collective health and our collective presence and futures. So, what can we do? We can build on trends. It's great when you're not swimming against the tide. And just as Mr. Rogers famously said, look to the helpers, there are already people out there putting out newsletters about climate change, newsletters about the level of devastation that we need to familiarize ourselves with so that we can better demand of our governments, more noisily demand of our governments, the type of action that's needed to stop digging our own graves with our own energy usage patterns. There are renewable energies that have improved in technology, have improved in efficiency levels, and if they become the beneficiaries of the billions of dollars of public money, government subsidies through public funds that fossil fuel companies have received, then we may well survive for some more decades. All right, I'm going to go. Thanks so much for listening. And thank you again to any replay viewers. Oh, I guess I made my face quite little then and just made this screenshot up, which was quite boring. I should have closed it or maybe just gone to something else for a change. Oh, this is the Twitter account that I've been recommending everybody follow. I'll read it out loud now so that people who listen to the podcast can also follow it. It's JEC Dems. So capital JECD and then EMS. That's for the Joint Economic Committee Democrats. And considering we won't be listening to much information put out by the lying Trump government because they're fascists who have an interest in deceiving the public to maintain power, we need to listen to those other people still in government, still with access to the type of resources that can be used to generate accurate figures. We need to listen to the Democrats and what they can tell us about the economy. So yes, more and more Americans are nervous about the future of Social Security. That's important, and that's an important element to stress if you have any Trump holdout family members or friends who are financially vulnerable. Stress to them that under the Republican Party and under Trump, they will likely lose their benefits or lose a significant amount of their benefits because Medicaid will be cut, Social Security will be cut. This is just interesting, showing that women are going to be pretty vulnerable to cuts in Social Security. Well, no wonder Trump is losing popularity then with white women without a college degree. Maybe they're wising up to the likely fate of their Social Security payments and the Social Security payments for their relatives, because women will be doing a lot of that extra caregiving if Trump's policies thrust a lot of elderly people out of nursing homes as a consequence of cuts to Medicaid. Women will be chained to the home or having to quit their jobs to look after elderly relatives. Women will be much more thrust into poverty, and their children also losing out financially as well as a consequence. So white men are the winners in terms of how much they've saved. Hispanic people, wow, they should be really not supporting Republicans. That looks like a fertile field for alerting people, any Hispanic people who, for religious reasons, still think Trump is going to deliver an end to abortion. They really need to be taught about all of the babies that will be pushed into poverty as a consequence of Republican sabotage of Social Security payments. And with that, I head off for the day. Thank you so much for listening, and take care. All the best, everyone. Please share any of my work that you think is share-worthy. Cheers and bye.